Welcome to The Genesis. My guest this week is Cara Levine, an artist who's based in California, but who actually lived and did work in Portland as well. She is on our radar right now, in particular because her work is on exhibit at the Oregon Jewish Museum and Center for Holocaust Education. Really fabulous exhibit. I encourage you to go down and to see it. Powerful, beautiful, moving, engaging, interesting. Also on exhibit there, as an aside, by the way, is the work of Steve Marcus, very different kind of artist who does a very different kind of work. And he also will be on the show in coming weeks. So the Jewish Museum here in Portland is really doing some incredible, great work on display. So I encourage you to go down there and to see it. Also, Cara will be up here in May. So if you like what you hear in this episode and you like what you see at the museum, which I know you will, you should stay tuned for information about that. And Art Lab will be publicizing information about that. Cara and I have a really wide-ranging conversation. It was a total delight to speak with her because, like me, she's very interested in Jewish mysticism. And like me, it has informed her work and the way she moves through the world. It's informed her thinking. What I love about Cara's work is that she is both very rooted in the world and in what's happening in the world. Some might even say her work brushes up against politics, but it's done in such a way that it transcends the normal black and white categories, the way we usually think about what's happening in her world. I would say one of the common themes, or if not the common theme, and she and I talk about this a lot in her work, is suffering and pain. And she'll get quite personal about that and about why that plays such an important role in her thinking and the way in which her creativity and her artistic expression is essential to addressing that and how in creating the kind of beauty that she creates in the work that she does. As I said, a wide-ranging conversation. We talk about her work. We talk about pain. We talk about migraine headaches. We talk about Joan Didion. We talk about Jewish mysticism and Kabbalah and its role in her life. So I think you're going to really dig this conversation. And thanks so much for listening to The Genesis. All right. Cara Levine.
It's me.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm good. I'm glad I got the right person. Welcome to the podcast. So honored and thrilled to have you. One question, this is a little bit random. I wanted to start with this. When I saw your work at the Oregon Jewish Museum, I was struck by many things, but I'm a big music head. And one of the things I was struck by is that I noticed immediately that one of the videos you have there explaining this project had Brian Eno's Apollo playing in the background. I didn't know if that was your choice.
It was my choice to use Brian Eno as like a reference, and then it was later mixed. It was, mixed through and adapted, but that's not what I thought you were going to bring up in the same video, actually.
Oh, really? You
thought
I was going to talk about your work, not Brian Eno's work.
I mean, Brian Eno is a genius for, he's the legend and in ambient sound and setting a mood and a tone. Yeah. And so if you want to do it right, sort of who to go to. Yeah.
So having invited on one artist, I'll talk about a different artist for 5 seconds. For people who are listening, Brian Eno, you probably know that name. The album Apollo is so magnificent. And I immediately liked Cara even before meeting her because she had woven that into her work. What did you think I was going to ask you about that video?
In that piece, and I was going to be like, wow, I can't believe you picked that out, because the piece it actually has a really beautiful sonal oral quality.
Yes.
The piece is called Carve, and it's this big dish that's like a bent wood, 9 foot, larger than body scale wooden bowl that's embedded in the wall. And the piece itself reverberates sound and catches it amplifies and then catches sound in whatever room it's installed in. So in the video, you'll see people facing the hole, we call it the hole, and they're speaking into the center of the hole, and it's being amplified out, and people can hear them beautifully without having to see their mouth or having the sound come off, in front of them. It's
okay, beautiful. So Cara has a magnificent exhibit at the Oregon Jewish Museum. The piece she just described is not at the museum, but there's a video in which, and that's at the San Francisco Museum?
The video has documentation from Contemporary Jewish Museum in San Francisco.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a video referring to this piece. Now, so let's talk about that. How important was the sound in your mind?
The sound part, I didn't discover until I was building it. Anticipated it, though. Had I been a sound engineer, I would have been able to anticipate it. If you go to the Exploratorium, or, there are opportunities to put yourself in this situation, like standing in a disc and talking into one disc, and then someone hears you on the other side of the room. That's kind of what this disc or dish does. And then, so as we were building it, I was working with a bunch of woodworkers, and we were laying these strips of basswood into a frame that we built. And we would, once there was one full sheet laid in, or one full layer, it was just obvious. Like, we would just be talking very quietly amongst each other, doing this handwork, and somebody across the shop could hear us.
Right.
Or we would be silent in the bowl, and somebody across the shop was talking quietly, and we could hear them. And so before it was installed, I was aware this was happening, and we were planning what's documented in the video, these 7 days. We called it 7 days of collective care. And we used this bowl as a site for other artists, spiritual leaders to come into the museum and do work about grief.
Yes.
This is where the sound became really important. First of all, it helped me to discern who I wanted to bring in, who I wanted to invite, and how they might use the bowl. And, very directly, like, I brought in a sound healer she's a vocalist, and she also plays instruments and singing bowls. And she just was so excited to use artwork as a tool to amplify her own work and fill the gallery with healing sound. So it actually just became like this amplifier, which was really powerful.
Right. One thing that's so interesting is that your work, as we'll talk about, seems to me to be so much about connecting disparate experiences and of people's individual grief or suffering in some way and other experiences, and bringing them together. So the fact that you had this happy accident that literally brought sound together is so fascinating.
Yeah, it was such a cool gift of the piece that I didn't anticipate. And that does happen, but I really got to take advantage of it, and I hope I get to more. The other element I was going to say was that we also held kind of quieter events where we did a writing workshop that was private with the group is called You're Going to Die, and they do a lot of work, writing workshops and open mics and all this work about dealing with your own mortality or mortality at all. And we did a writing workshop, and it was very intimate. And for people to share, they had this opportunity to share facing away from the group, which gave them a little bit more ease and comfort and intimacy. It was like putting one of those, like, blurring their face out, basically. So it made them a little less vulnerable, but we could still hear them and use this other sensory experience.
Fascinating. Yeah. I wanted to talk about pain a little bit because it seems to be important to you. Mm-hmm. And there's all kinds of pain, but I thought maybe one way to get in there was you have this beautiful little essay that is really a letter to Joan Didion. You suffer from migraines. Yeah. She wrote an essay called In Bed or The Bed or something that addresses her experience of migraines. Why was that worth writing about to you? Is that kind of pain important in your work, or just tell me? I was struck by it.
I appreciate that you found that. That's like 10 years past or a little more, maybe. Yeah, I mean, pain is, so for me, I guess pain is something that is profoundly isolating, make very alone. It's an intimate individual experience that you're going through. and it's a universal experience. Without sounding cliche or whatever, we can't skip pain, physical or emotional pain in this life. Like, we're all going to experience it. And I was going through a particularly like transformative and devastating period in my life. I was living with chronic debilitating migraines for a year. I was basically debilitated. And so I was actually consuming a lot of literature and nonfiction and fiction about migraines specifically and about neurologic pain.
Just to paint a picture so people don't think it's just like a headache. Just let people understand what a migraine is about.
I'll tell you that if you have one and you've never had one before, you immediately are like, this is a migraine. It's not a headache. So what a migraine is actually the swelling of, what happens in a migraine is your brain is swelling. So your brain is swelling and it's causing basically inflammation to your whole nervous system. So when people have experiences like sensitivity to light, fragrance, they feel nauseous, like all these different symptoms happen with migraine, it's because your entire nervous system is feeling this inflammation. Oh. And so you really, for me, my mom used to call it withering. I would just like completely go inward. I didn't want to be touched, talked to, looked at. Nothing sensorial could get in that experience. And so
you just had to shut down.
You just fully retreat. And then there's all these really I find interesting physiological things that are happening because your brain is experiencing this swelling. Your head gets hot and your extremities get cold, your hands and feet. This might be too nuts and bolts, but
no, it's okay. Because all the blood is here.
Blood is moving into your head, moving out of your limbs. So over this year, I eventually found this incredible doctor who taught biofeedback, which is basically meditation in a medical language or visualization or whatever you want to call it. But he teaches you techniques to move your blood with your mind out of your head and back into the rest of your body. So I was having steroids injected into my head. I was taking all the meds. I was having headaches. I mean, the lengths people go to try to alleviate the pain is so great. And then you get to this point where you're living in chronic pain and you can't alleviate it with drugs anymore. And then your doctor says, after 9 months, by the way, we have a chronic pain group. By the way, we have a chronic headache group. And I'm like, wait, why didn't you tell me this 9 months ago?
And just for people listening, the cost of this, it's not just, oh, this was a horrible day. Days or weeks of the month are gone, right?
Yeah, I was having what defines chronic migraine is 16 plus days a month that you're debilitated.
Oh, my Lord.
So it actually put me through a really beautiful personal transformation because when I was in this sort of debilitated state, I'm basically in bed with ice on my head because the ice will cool my head. And that was all I could do. You have to accept you are living with this as your reality. And so hundreds of hours of living in this pain, I mean, I fought really hard. And then something very dynamic turned in me, and I started to surrender, and I started to learn how to live with what was happening instead of fighting it. And many doors opened, emotional, creative, and including, I felt this connection to other artists who had gone through this or who go through this. And I felt like I gave myself this invitation to reach out to Joan Didion. And I also, that time, I presented an art show for Oliver Sacks, who is a hero of mine, who's the neuroscientist who, wrote dozens of books, but actually his very first book is called Migraine. And it is still like one of the most comprehensive books about what is actually happening in the brain during migraines. We were in the 60s. And I curated an exhibition with artists who live with disabilities across many different spectra that connected to his oeuvre. And actually, that show coincided with his death, which was actually a coincidence. So going through this really turned my lens towards this universal experience.
I see. Yeah. Yeah, I remember in your essay, in that essay, you resonate in particular with Joan Didion talking about like how to work around or manage this thing. But my question was this: did you write that before this biofeedback process? I see. Obviously, grief is very central to the work that you do, and I'm wondering if there's any kind of connection between your personal pain through migraines, which have been so important in your life, and the centrality of grief in some way.
You know, we could do a whole like couch session about, you know, basically feeling separate, isolated as a child and longing for connection through struggle, through suffering. And
there's a lot, there's a lot of avenues that shaped your particular.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think for whatever reason, like I've been shaped in a way where I'm very tuned into the loss that we're all carrying and that we're all experiencing all the time.
Right.
And it's something that creates a level of understanding mutuality for me in the world that sometimes is bearable and sometimes is unbearable.
Okay, so in my mind, this connects to the influence or the impact of your study of mysticism on this, because like everyone is experiencing reality through their own subjective and separate framework of just being themselves. And obviously every mystical tradition has in some form of expression the idea that we're all part of this larger unity. Did art lead you to mysticism, or is it a separate journey and trip? What's the connection? And by the way, what's the nature of have you read books on it?
My entrance was my grandmother. My dad's mom was a Jewish mystic and a painter.
Wow.
And
oh my gosh.
He really studied, and I didn't really inherit I guess I did inherit, but like she didn't give them to me. My aunt gave me.
But before you go on, isn't it's a little unusual and very magnificently wonderful that somebody of your grandmother's generation would have been studying.
It's very unusual. Very unusual. She was a painter, and actually in the show, there's one of her paintings, the Carve. And that was her painting that I replicated in paper. And so she was not only a mystic, but she was very out of reach for me. She was a painter. Mm-hmm. She wasn't like a grandmother who liked kids. You know, she liked her work. And her husband, my grandfather, I was much closer to, and he was a sculptor late in life, and their studios shared a wall. So I would explore their studios, him a sculptor and her a painter. And she had all these books she had a copy of Zohar. She had books about numerology and, you know, all these mystical traditions. And I inherited her Zohar. Translation. And so I started just reading this translation on my own. And in 2012, I was in a show, or 2013, it was in a church at the Grace Cathedral in San Francisco. And I was asked to make a work about my faith tradition for the first time. And I decided I don't really make work about being Jewish, but my grandmother did. And I have this book, and I want to dive into this. And so I used that show as a way in. And actually, I brought Larry Kushner to the show and kind of insisted that we have a conversation about Jewish mysticism.
Yeah.
And at the time I used to teach yoga, and I got into meditation through, through the Buddhist tradition. And I was living in Berkeley, like
I see.
all these Jubus, and that was very much my entrance into meditative practice. And Larry was like, why? I will never forget this. He was like, I said to him, I believe there are many paths up the mountain. There's many paths up the mountain, same mountain, same diamond in the sky. And he's like, why would you take all these paths? You were born on a path. You were born on a path. Like, you can take this path that is actually partially traveled.
Yes.
And we were like having this debate over lunch.
But did he convince you? Or, I mean,
No, he didn't, because I'm stubborn. And
yeah.
But I would say it's been working on me for 15 years or 12 years. Like, I still remember that conversation, and I still go closer and closer. And it has actually allowed this prism of Jewish mystical practice to widen, or this lens that has felt like a way into meditate, to what I get and seek through meditation practice. I have now an entry point in my own inherited, ancestral lineage, which feels very powerful.
What's so fascinating about his question to you, like, why would you, change paths, is it makes an assumption that I think is so much, this is such a live question for so many people right now.
Yeah.
Is my historical or familial lineage, the fact that it exists, does that mean it is my path? And I think a lot of people would clearly say, no, my path, hard earned, is through Buddhism or secularism or whatever. Yeah. And it so happens that I'm trailed by this legacy of family stuff that might be rooted in Judaism, but that doesn't mean that it is my path.
What I'll say to that I think is really valuable is the way I was raised in a Jewish family, culture, synagogue taught me a ton, but it did not teach me how to have a spiritual practice.
Right.
And I seek a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
And I found other ways into spiritual practice. And through those other ways, I found a way back to my Judaism and found ways into where the spirit actually comes alive for me.
Beautiful.
It wasn't sort of, I feel like I'm sort of like sad by the lack of magic. This is my own opinion, but the lack of magic and the kind of like real priority towards materialism in what we consider, it's like semi-secular Jewish American culture.
Sure.
And so anyway, for me, I really wanted to connect with what I understood as a divine experience. And I'm growing up in a synagogue where they say you don't have to believe in God. And I'm just like, what?
So many people in so many religious traditions grew up essentially with North American secular materialism.
Right.
And people are telling you this should be the most important thing in your life. But it sounds like maybe even though you're very stubborn, and I would never want to suggest that he won the argument, maybe he got
in there. And
he got in there.
But what also got in there were my ancestors.
Yeah.
Because and this does tie back to this piece, the Insaf is us. That piece is a gift that I made to both my grandmothers, my maternal and paternal grandmothers, because I do feel them as guideposts. Yeah. Particularly the women. And I'm like 99% Ashkenazi. Like, this is a very deep bloodline. And for me to know myself, I do want to know my ancestry.
Sure. I understand.
That's also not true for everybody.
You have this line that I encountered at your show. I don't remember if it was the name of a piece or it appears somewhere. The mystic, you said, is nourished from this sphere.
Yeah.
Is there a relationship between the mystic and the artist? Or is there a difference?
So that is the second title after the colon for Carve. It's Carve, the mystic is nourished from this sphere. And actually both have mystical roots. But that sentence I lifted from my grandmother's Zohar when it's talking about, it's describing the 10 Sephirot. So in Kabbalah, the divine, the essence of the divine being the emanation in 10 swirling, spinning spheres. These spinning spheres are called Sephira, Sephirot, and each of the 10 have their own distinct characteristics. And the sphere that was being described was the sphere called Chokmah, or wisdom.
Right.
And I found it so nourishing, so beautiful to think that in wisdom, the mystic is nourished by this wisdom.
Yeah.
It's a food, it's a sustenance, it's a nourishment.
Yeah.
And for me, the way that connected to Carve, where in Carve, I'm collecting the grief or the losses of others, and I'm placing them in this bowl.
They're like nourishing, or they're flowing through you. Yeah.
Yes, they go.
And by the way, people need to know a little bit about this work just to understand. People would write down some source of grief or cause of pain to them, and that would then come into your hands, and you would carve, and I think trying to imitate their handwriting, if I'm not mistaken, very beautifully, you would carve into the wood. So there's now a public display of these very personal expressions of grief. So it's flowing through you in that way.
Yes, it's flowing through me, and it's finding a home.
Yeah.
And that home is where, as you talked about before, this sort of universal concept in mysticism of the oneness.
Yes.
Where this child's loss of their fish is sitting in the same bowl as the mother's loss of her child.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay.
It's still touching for me that it doesn't matter the level of the loss.
Yeah.
It's the feeling of loss that we share. And so to sort of use my body as the conduit allows me to gain this wisdom.
Yes.
And so it also, like, for the person who's standing there in being in this reverberation of all this sound and language, they also are in this sphere and they're receiving.
So that must have been, I mean, evidently very intense for you as you're carving people's grief. It's flowing through you emotionally. You're having to confront this.
Yeah, no, it's like part blessing, part problem.
Yeah.
I can imagine. And it's something that I question in myself. Like, why am I looking so closely at this?
Yeah.
But it feels very essential to me in to see people is to see this for me.
If you were in Portland, to go to the Oregon Jewish Museum and Center for Holocaust Education and see this exhibit, because you will see a description of Carve, but there's other work there which we'll yet talk about that also has this grief and hurt at the middle of it. Yeah. I want to just reflect the cause of our suffering is our very existence. Somebody losing their goldfish, as you beautifully said, it's like in a sense, the ache, the hurt, the pain, which comes from our individualization and our separation,
right,
is an inevitable feature of our existence.
Yes,
and our yearning to connect with others and to connect is the solution to that. You did a beautiful job explaining the Sefirot, but Chokhmah is like near the purest manifestation of divine within the world, and Chokhmah is described by the mystics as this like creative force in potential. And that's why I was asking about, though it says the mystic is nourished from the sphere, whether the artist is also nourished from the sphere. And if I'm wondering, I guess, if your artistic work is part of your religious practice, or if
Yeah. I mean, I think of, sorry, I'm cutting you off, but
no, because you got what I was going to say.
yeah. I mean, I will say to the art nerds, there is also a play with a famous Bruce Nauman title and Neon Peace, which the language I'm losing it right now exactly, but it's something like, it's about the mystic as the artist. And we should look it up and find this title. He also uses this language of the mystic in parallel to the artist. So there's that sort of a coy, like, art world play of language that's happening. But it's also intentional that I'm tying the artist to the mystic. Yeah. I actually really believe that creativity itself, like the sort of font that is creativity, is kind of the same place as this deep wisdom it's about.
Yes.
And so if you can contact in yourself through whatever practice, spiritual practice, creative practice, meditation, this subtler state of consciousness, really, where you're tapping into what's basically a well of knowledge. This well of knowledge is where creativity comes from.
Yes.
It's also where the wisdom lies.
I see.
And so they're the same. They are the same. And for me, that's actually, therein lies the value of art and the value of creativity, because it is this sort of essential newness to foster ideas, and creative thinking is to foster a sense of connectivity, oneness, and spiritual growth.
Yes, I see. They're hand in hand. They're not opposed. They're not irrelevant to each other.
Yeah. And it's also, we live in a world where we have so many answers. You know, we can buy anything we want on Amazon with one click. You know, we have very little wandering and wondering. We have very little going through the stacks in the library, exploring. There's so much knowing. And what both of these pursuits cultivate is questioning and not knowing. And through the questioning that you get fresh answers, if that makes sense.
I'll tell you something that really, I think you just helped me identify something that really resonated about the work, This Is Not a Gun.
Yeah.
And that, and I guess we should explain it in a second, but I'll just say, I tend not to like ideologically heavy politicized art. And I found your piece, This Is Not a Gun, really incredibly powerful.
Thank you.
Because it is political, and you can explain it in a second, but it very much floats far beyond that. It's impossible to look at that and not think about 21st century America, but it is something that's much more than that.
That I began in 2016 in my studio in Portland. And it's a project where I started after somebody sent me a list of objects that police had mistaken as guns in the shootings of unarmed civilians. The list was very bare. It has on it a sandwich, a Bible, a cell phone, a set of keys, like your most mundane, ubiquitous objects.
And the cop sees somebody with this from a distance and shoots them and kills them because they thought that the sandwich was a gun. Is that the idea?
That's the idea.
Yeah.
One can infer they thought the black man was dangerous and they shot him anyway, and then later they thought he had a gun.
No, I understand.
So it was just a blatant excuse for racist violence, racial violence, is sort of what I was seeing in this list. But what was absent to me in this list was all of this context. There was no names, no locations, no instances. Did this person live or die? Was this person a man, a woman, black, white? Like, we don't know anything. And so there were two things happening to me at once. First, I was like, in what world can you mistake a hairbrush for a gun? And this impulse, this sort of like, for me, feeling like this list was very empty, of sort of void of humanity, I wanted to sort of slow it down and spread it out is sort of the way that I think about it. And I said, if I can make a hairbrush from nothing, from like a piece of wood into a hairbrush, maybe somewhere along the way, I will see how it was seen as a gun as it's coming into its shape.
So was that like an exercise in empathy, or what was that about?
I thought of the carving as a devotional labor. So when you say an exercise for empathy, I thought of it, this is me offering my time and my attention to the loss of this person's life, or to the shooting, to the incident that happened, this sort of grave injustice that happened. While I was carving, I put myself through a kind of re-education of the history of race in the US. Like, I'm a liberal, left young person. I was in Oakland for many years when Black Lives Matter was founded. I'm an activist. I'm aware, but I needed the time to really dig deep. And same thing, we're talking about mystical practice. Okay, so I'm reading now literature and nonfiction around why did we get here? Why are we in this situation? And I also did research about every instance of every shooting. So I know the name and the circumstance of every one of these shootings.
Were the objects that are depicted, like the hairbrush, for example, was that just you summoning up a random image of a hairbrush, or was that like evidence from the crime scene?
That was me summoning up.
Got it. Okay.
And actually, there was some choice in there, but yeah, I had some artistic license because I never saw the hairbrush, but I made choices where I wanted to have an idealized version of this. I wanted to have a pristine hairbrush. And actually, in the Oregon show, I'm like a little sad because that hairbrush was damaged before the show opened. A viewer came to the show after we installed it and touched it and broke it. It's very, very delicate. No. So I have to repair it later. But so the hairbrush is not a great example of pristine. But the idea is that, like an angel is a manifestation of somebody thriving. It's not a manifestation of somebody after an accident, right? So I'm thinking about the object as like it in its essential kind of pristine, unbroken form. Anyway, so I spent many years carving these objects, learning all of this. And after a little while, soon into the project, I opened my studio and started hosting workshops where we make these objects in clay. And I collaborate with activists and healers, healing arts people, meditation leaders who are already working on racial equity issues. And we make these same objects in clay. And clay is, a very accessible material. Anybody can use it. Everybody knows how to use it. But the touching of the object, the touching of the clay brings people into a more embodied experience, and they're not thinking so much about police violence. They're thinking about making, and then they're drawn into a more emotional experience, and they can talk about what does this trauma feel like in my body and to me. And these are all intersectional workshops that are held across race. So it's a very nuanced experience. But anyway, the objects that I make, very much like in Carve, I think of my body as this tool that is trying to understand something through the making, if that makes sense.
I don't know that you intended it, but that links up with my identification of these objects as relics. Like there's something almost like these ordinary objects, like I'm thinking of the cane that was like this wood carved cane that looks exactly like an elderly person's cane.
Yeah.
They almost become sacralized. Do you feel a responsibility as an artist, or is it not? Does it not start there with you? Is it more just like that's how you commune with what's around?
It's more the latter, but it's like the gesture of the first and the thought of the latter. It starts as a very personal the language I use, like when I write about my work, is an irreconcilable reality that I'm facing. Something that I cannot reconcile emotionally, like how was a cell phone mistaken as a gun? What an idiot. I can't reconcile that. You're killing somebody. It just like, they don't add up. The explanation does not justify the action. And so when I can't understand or reconcile something, I turn to my work. I try to find a way into the problem through making. And I just have learned at this distance into my practice that I will find something meaningful through making. I'm not going to find a way to reconcile it, I don't think.
So, because the event has happened and some things can't be made sense of, but you're trying to establish some kind of knowing, some kind of connection.
I also don't want to blow by things. I think that's the thing that I don't talk about that a lot, but we are inundated with so much tragedy, and these tragedies are very real and hold so much pain. And I think 99 out of 100 tragedies are blowing by me, but at some point I just need to stop and hold this, and this is very serious. Let's take it seriously.
And the nature of the work is such that you don't knock out these very carefully made wooden objects in an hour. Like I imagine, like by the way, how long the cane, for example, how long did that or the hairbrush take?
Actually, it's interesting you ask, because in that work, and this is not a gun, in the materials, I include the hours. So the cane, I don't have it off the top of my head, but the brush, I think, took about 100 hours.
Oh my gosh,
it was one of the longest ones. But to be fair, like a cell phone only took 6 hours. And more people have died holding a cell phone than any other object. And so to include the hours also is an act of futility. To say I'm devoting 100 hours to making this, and I'm devoting 6 hours to making this.
Yes.
It's totally empty. It doesn't get me any closer to rectifying anything, but it does say like it's deserving of some time. It's probably deserving of more.
And it seems to me that there's something profoundly devotional, to use your word, in this kind of work. I also noticed that everything there is made out of wood, except for the wallet, which looks like it's made out of marble. And I wanted to ask you what that's about, if anything.
There's always a story. I made a wallet out of wood, and I exhibited the wallet and some other pieces at a show in Los Angeles for social justice, and it was swiped from the pedestal. So I was bereft, and I have a friend who is a stonemason, and he really wanted to participate in the project somehow around the same time. And I said, maybe can you recreate this wallet? It's the same wallet that I made. He did it from photographs. Can you recreate it in marble? And he said he'd be happy to. And he made it. And it later had this extra resonance because the wallet is where the timeline begins. On this list starts in 1999.
Oh, and it was the first one?
It's the first one. It was very instance. It was Amadou Diallo, who was a immigrant who was reaching for his wallet for his ID and was killed in New York. And it's like, you have to begin this list somewhere, like where I'm not going to go back to, police in the US have been killing people, Black men and women, for no reason at all since the beginning of America. So this list has to begin somewhere. And it begins in 1999 with Amadou Diallo and his wallet.
Wow.
And so then the marble also is, it's the color of, it's the stone of a gravestone. So
I see.
It had an added resonance. But yeah, it's the only one. the only one. Maybe if I was a stonemason, they would all be marble.
Wait, did he make it to the exact specifications of the one that you had made?
Yeah.
Wow.
It stands in for the one that I made. The most recent piece in the show is Silver Linings. And that piece, just briefly, we lost my childhood home in the LA fires.
Right.
And also other family homes and homes of many friends. I grew up in the Pacific Palisades. And so I've been making drawings in the sandbox of objects that people lost in the fire in pewter. They're drawing them directly, and then I'm casting them, and I'm casting one for them and one for me. And the one for me builds this archive, which is 22 of them are on exhibit at the Oregon Museum. But the plug is that if any of your listeners have been impacted by what people call extreme weather events, I am going to be hosting a workshop, not a workshop, I'm going to be hosting Silver Linings like events, one-on-one, I'm making these objects with people in Oregon who've been impacted by climate.
And are you doing that in Portland, or is that
in the museum?
Oh, wow.
In the museum. We're going to be casting directly into the small sandbox that's in the show.
I'm so grateful for the beauty of your work and the care that you give into shaping it and thinking about it, talking about it. I'm grateful for your time. And I hope we can meet when you're next up here. And in the meantime, I want to just close by asking you the questions I ask everybody, which is just to tell us first one thing that you want to turn people onto that you're into and appreciating and loving.
One thing that I'm into and appreciating and loving. I'm just going to say riding my bike. I just recently got a baby seat to put on my back of my bike for my 15-month-old. And it's really fun for me to be on my bike. It's really fun to have a little baby behind me. And just feels free, playful, like loose.
Yeah.
Really.
By the way, it happens to be a sunny day in Oregon right now at this moment, but all the Oregonians listening to you recommending taking bike rides right now are horribly jealous because we have to wait a few more months until that's easy. Yeah, I used to love to do that too. And I remember it's very liberating and fun, and it's also terrifying because you've got this baby on the back. But
he's like,
anyway,
and hollering. It's so cute.
Do you ride up in the mountains?
No. I mean, maybe one day, but no, we're on the road.
So bike riding, that is a healthy and nourishing recommendation. I love it. And what is the best Jewish food?
I mean, there are a lot of really good Jewish foods. I'm just going to say matzah brai.
Yes.
Do
you make it or do you eat it?
I make it and I eat it, and I eat it with applesauce. And so,
interesting.
I don't know why it's like I merge a latke and matzah. Nobody else ate it with applesauce, but I always did that. Little salt, little applesauce. But I love the matzah brai.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are, one of the pleasures, it sounds like you have a youngster. We have a 17-year-old, 15-year-old, 14-year-old. Oh, wow. And one of the great pleasures is making all of these delicious foods for them.
Yeah.
And then taking some of it for myself. I know the question I wanted to ask you, and maybe I'll put it in the show notes or maybe we'll just end on this. Do you happen to know the translation of the Zohar that you're lucky enough to have from your grandma?
I do.
What a precious gift to have from a grandmother artist, Kabbalist to another.
I'll show you some of my favorite books since we're here.
Edit.
So this is my grandmother's Zohar, Book of Enlightenment.
Oh yeah, I know that. I don't know the translation that well, but I know that publisher,
Daniel
Jewish Light.
Shannon.
Who is it?
Daniel Shannon Matt.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh, Daniel Matt. Oh my gosh. That guy is incredible. I did not know that he did that. But if I don't know
anything about him.
I'll just tell you briefly. I don't know the level of your sustained interest in Kabbalah and the Zohar, but if you are interested,
copyright 1983.
It's called the Pritzker edition.
Oh, okay.
And it's that same guy, but I did not know he had done a previous translation. It's multi-volume, so it's quite expensive to buy the whole thing, but it's just gorgeous. And his notes are really helpful in understanding the content.
This is the other book that was my grandmother's.
Oh, great. The Merkava and the tradition. Will you raise it a little bit? Merkava tradition and the Zohar tradition. David R. Blumenthal. Sounds Jewish.
Sounds Jewish. And I've now taken 2 courses with the Beit Kohenet online. Do you know this group?
Oh, yeah.
Founded by Jill Hammer.
Oh, wonderful.
And Ra, translated by Jill Hammer, is just breathtaking. Breathtaking. And just this whole like pre-Kabbalah mystical study.
Yeah.
And it is just has totally exploded my understanding. And this book in particular, Sefer Yetzirah, is all about carving and breath and channels and like the language of my studio. You know, this is very humbling because it felt like there was this beautiful resonance happening. And I just feel very honored to be able to look at this stuff.
Yeah, that's a beautiful, that's the right relationship, I think, to the wisdom traditions that we have. Yeah. Is that there's something when you encounter this stuff that's hundreds and hundreds of years old and you feel humbled by its insights, it's quite beautiful.
Yeah, it's very cool. So,
all right, I thank you so much. I really hope to get to see you when is that? The Oregon?
It's on my calendar right here. I will be there May 18th to the 24th.
That's interesting because, May 18th, if I'm not mistaken, is the anniversary of Mount St. Helens explosion and devastation of the accompanying area. So
I did not know that.
That's it seems to be very Cara Levine date to come to Portland.
I hope I don't bring another explosion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I thank you so much. Wonderful to talk with you. Take care.
Okay. Bye.